Hi, my name is Abby Linville, and this is my Module 1 assignment. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Iowa. I moved to Kansas City about 15 years ago. I currently live in Shawnee, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City. I've been married to my husband Luke for 12 years, and we have 11-year-old twins named Reese and Eli. They just started sixth grade about 2 weeks ago, and sixth grade in our school district is still in the elementary school, so we have one more year at elementary before they move to middle school. I am currently an instructional coach in Turner, which is a school district that is in Kansas City, Kansas. It's a small school district. We have one high school, one middle school, and 4 elementary schools. I spent my first 10 years in Turner working as a classroom teacher, and I taught first grade. About 5 years ago, I moved to the role of instructional coach. I spent the first 4 years as a coach working primarily with second and third grade teachers. And then this year, I have started working primarily with kindergarten and first grade teachers. So it's really exciting to get to move back to the primary grades, and it's been a really great experience so far. So today I'm going to talk to you about the 3 levels of government and how they support public education. So I'm going to start off with talking about the support at the local level. The local level carries the most responsibility for the public schools in their community. They provide about 50% of the funding for the school, and this funding comes from property taxes. The state creates and designates school districts, and then those school districts are comprised have a school board that is comprised of members of the community, and then the school board designates a superintendent that runs the school. I'm going to talk a little bit more later on about the role school boards play in school districts a little later in the presentation. Okay, next let's talk about the support that is provided at the state level. So the state provides slightly less than half the funding for schools. These funds come from taxes. The way the funding takes place is laid out in the state constitution, and it usually comes from income and sales tax and sometimes from state lotteries. The state governments give authority to the Department of Education, and they also, at the government level, pass laws that govern the school practices and again outline the funding that is provided. They also lay out any regulations that they want the schools to follow as well. They also create and enforce the standards that are used throughout the state in all of the school districts. Much of the state's authority is actually given to the local level, but at any time they can take that authority back. Now let's talk about the support at the federal level. So at the federal level, they have very limited support that they provide. They only provide about 8% of the funding for the public school system. There is nothing laid out or clearly stated in the laws or in the Constitution about the role that the federal government should actually play. So there are some amendments and laws that kind of support these 4 common sets of principles for how the role that the actual federal government plays. So the 4 common sets of principles are laid out here on the slide. The first is that we ensure that no student is denied the right to an equal educational opportunity. That means that no one is discriminated against based off of their disabilities, their socioeconomic status, or their race. We provide funding to support high-need students. This includes students who are living in poverty and also students who have disabilities. They also support education, research, and development so that school districts around America are provided with the most current information that we have out there. And this research also helps promote and support policies and practices that they would like to see in place. And they also support the growth and improvements of state and local education systems. So there are some laws, like I said before, that influence those four common principles. So I wanted to briefly discuss some of them with you. So the 10th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution both play a role in education. The 10th Amendment states that the powers that are not clearly stated in the Constitution then fall back to the state. So that's why that public education not being in the Constitution is why the state has more of a control over the public education system, and then the state then chooses to push most of that authority to the local system. The 14th Amendment is the amendment that says that all people who are living in America are offered equal protection under the law, which then leads to the protection of civil rights, which plays a role in education and making sure that everyone is provided with an equal educational opportunity. So there was one law created in 1965, and that was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It was part of Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty and included parts that started Title I funding, which is still present in schools today. So it's important to keep in mind that the federal government provides this funding, but all the government funding or federal government funding comes with rules and regulations that states and local school districts need to meet in order to receive that funding. So from that act, it led to several acts that came after it that kind of make up or influence the educational system in America. IDEA was one of those big acts that had a great effect on students who have disabilities. So IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and that act made it so that all students with disabilities are entitled to free and appropriate education in America. The ESEA Act also led to the No Child Left Behind Act, which that act kind of upped the rigor in the evaluation of standards and required that every state provide students with tests to check to make sure that they're making adequate yearly progress and that they're meeting their grade level standards. There were problems with that law because some of the standards that were set were really high, and there were other issues that led to them adjusting it, and they started the race to the top, which was not exactly a law, but it did encourage incentives, which means money, to people who were using college and career ready standards, were developing data systems in their educational system, and they were tying teacher evaluation to student outcomes. So from that, we then come to the act that we are currently using, which is the ESSA Act, which still includes evaluation and also looks at intervening with schools who are performing in the lower 5%. But instead of the federal government outlining what will happen if you are not meeting progress and making gains with students, that now falls back to the state level. So who is in charge at these levels? So at the local level, it is mostly controlled by a school board. The school board is comprised of elected members of the local community. They are volunteers and are not paid for their role. They then designate a superintendent who acts as like the CEO of the school district, and kind of all the policies that are laid out for the school board, he then puts those into place within the school district and hires principals and other administrators to support him in setting out or laying out these policies and supporting them in the school district. Both the superintendent and other administrators are paid positions. I also wanted to talk a little bit about what the school board actually does. So they ensure that all state and federal laws are followed. They help establish the curriculum that the school district is going to use. They hire and they decide on the budget and how the funding that we get from our property taxes and the state level taxes and federal government, how that is used to meet all those rules and regulations and also to promote student success in the school district. At the state level, there is a state school board that is elected, and they are also volunteers, and they are in charge of the general supervision of all the educational institutions, and they also work on accreditation. They then appoint a commissioner. The commissioner in Kansas is Dr. Randy Watson, and he serves as an executive director, and he is in a paid position. The state senators and representatives also play a role in education because they create the laws and regulations that guide state funding, and they are also paid positions as well. At the federal level, we have a Secretary of Education. They are a member of the Cabinet of the United States. Our current one is Miguel Cardona. He was nominated by the president and then confirmed by the Senate, and he is in a paid position. He leads the Department of Education. The role of the Secretary of Education and the Department of Education at the federal level is to provide a leadership role and how we can improve education. And they also support us in making sure that we are providing access to all students and that we are using best practices and providing excellence in schools from preschool through postdoctoral research. We also have to remember that the U.S. senators and U.S. representatives play a role in education as well. They help lay out those laws and regulations. They are elected by us and are in paid positions. So I want to talk about the influence that each of the levels have on the different components. So component 6.1 talks a lot about how to develop and implement systems for management, communication, technology, and a mission and vision. I believe that that responsibility falls to the local level. The policies are set by the school board, and mission and visions are created by the individual schools and by the district. For component 6.2, it talks about how to evaluate and advocate for data-informed and equitable resourcing plans that will help support school improvement and student development. I'm a little torn by this because I feel like much of the funding rules are set by the state level, but how the money is spent is decided locally. So I think it's a little bit of both in a partnership about how that is laid out and done goes to both levels. 6.3 is how you reflectively evaluate, communicate the laws and rights and policies that promote student and adult success and well-being. I also felt torn by this as well because the state sets the rules and regulations for how we become accredited schools, and we then as a school district decide how we're going to do that and how those plans are going to be communicated out at the local level. So I think again it's a partnership between both. All of this supports students and adults by providing them with access to free and appropriate education. It protects the values and morals of the communities by having most of the responsibility of public education at the local level. We really can make sure that it's reflective of the community that we're serving. And a lot of those rules and regulations ensure that we're providing our students with a rigorous curriculum that is pushing them to be the best that they can be. This is my correlation slide. This assignment gave me a deeper understanding of the role that the three levels of government play in education, and also reminded me of the importance of working closely with the community members that are in the community that you are serving, because they play a great role in how the school budget is spent and what the curriculum will look like in the district you are serving. Here are the references that I used for this presentation. Thank you.